On behalf of the Skoll Centre for Social Entrepreneurship, welcome to the 2020 Skoll Venture Awards. We're excited that you can join us. It's nice to imagine all your smiling faces across the globe. By way of introduction, I'm Chris Blues, and I work with the Skoll Centre, and I'm based in the very cloudy Oxford. Over the next 2 hours, we'll have pitches from 4 incredible ventures, a provocation from our keynote speaker, Indy Johar, and contributions and questions from Skoll and our judges. So, what are these awards all about? Skoll Venture Awards provide up to £50,000 in early stage funding to ventures tackling the root cause of social and environmental challenges. Ventures have at least one student from Oxford, alumnus, current staff member, faculty member in their founding team. They all have a revenue generating business model that's not reliant on charitable donations, and the venture needs to be more than just an idea. It should be a pilot, prototype, or an early stage traction. Most importantly, they have a thorough understanding of a problem they're seeking to tackle and how their venture addresses that problem specifically and the underlying drivers of that problem. And that really feeds into why we're running these awards. I've recently been thinking about a quote by Danella Meadow. And she says, the best way to deduce a system's purpose is to watch it and see how the system behaves. And I think we've all been reflecting a lot about that lately. The economic, the political, the environmental system around us and the interconnections between them. Systems are not controlled or predicted, but we believe at Skoll that they can be and nurtured into being. For us at Skoll, it's about understanding the broad perspectives, but also working on specific possibilities and leverage points within that system. And these awards are an attempt to build tangible interventions to accelerate systemic change. They link to our research insights, they utilize our global network of students and alumni, and they really do complement and feed into our education programs. At the heart of our work is the idea of systems leadership and social entrepreneurship. The idea of taking action to change a problematic state of affairs. And we believe that significant social change will only happen if individuals demonstrate that leadership. These awards are here to celebrate and support those individuals and teams that have chosen to demonstrate that leadership through building venture. So it's a pleasure to welcome you to these awards and celebrate these individuals, teams and organisations together. The Dean of Oxford, Peter Stefano, would also like to welcome you to these awards. He can't join us today in person or virtually, but we do have a recorded film, which is going to be played now.
Hi, I'm Peter Stefano, and I'm the Dean at Oxford Said. I'm thrilled to welcome you here to the Skoll Venture Awards. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person or virtually in person, but I am here in spirit with you, because the work that you're doing is critical to the life of this school, and we celebrate it. Here at the school, we talk about tackling world-scale problems. And what that means is that in our research, we look at some of the biggest issues of the world and try to make sense of them, to try to figure out intervention points. In our teaching programs, for example, through our Global Opportunities and Threats program, or GO-TO, which Peter Drobeck co-organized, our students spent the entire term trying to understand intervention points to address the issues of climate. And today we're going to celebrate 4 teams that have made their ways to the final of the Skoll Venture Awards. Each of you has put together a coherent plan. You've looked carefully at a problem that needs to be solved. You've figured out an intervention point. You've got a team that's in place. And we're really looking forward to your final presentations. So first of all, congratulations to everyone. Regardless of who wins, you're all winners in my mind because you're all trying to do the right things and solve the world's problems. Have an incredibly interesting program here, and thank you for your service to the world.
Before we move on, I'd just like to say a few thank yous. And first one is to the Said Business School, in particular Dean Stefano. Secondly, the Skoll Foundation for their continuing support and energy for what we're doing here at the Skoll Centre. I'd also like to thank our friends and partners in the Oxford Impact ecosystem, the Oxford Foundry, the Entrepreneurship Centre, Oxford University Innovation, Oxford Hub, Enterprising Oxford. They all work in the social venture space, and we're really excited to be partnered with them and work with them to try and build as many social ventures from the Oxford Impact ecosystem as possible. I'd like to particularly thank the Skoll Centre team And specifically, I'd like to thank the MBA due diligence team that turned around the applications in such a short period of time, and particularly the Skoll Venture Awards Committee. So since 2012, we've actually given grant investments in 13 ventures working across disability tech, medical diagnostics, health tech, ag tech, energy, and gaming. This year was a big year for us because we actually had over 100 applications. 57% of the applications were from male founders, with 43% from female founders. And this year we beat our record by having applications from over 20 countries from around the world. And those 100 applications are now 4. And I'd like to introduce our finalists briefly. So the first finalist is Jammy Life. And they're using tech to increase access to home care in Africa. Next up is Solar Energy, and they're democratizing access to technology for solar installers in Africa. Then we have MedBuddha, providing verifiable and affordable pharmaceuticals directly to patients in Kenya. And last but not least, we have Wazi, who provide affordable, secure, and accessible therapists in Africa. We have a total prize fund of 50,000 to give away today, and that will be split between the main Skoll Venture Award and the Audience Choice Award. We were considering to change the prize fund to something that I considered more valuable in a pandemic lockdown, which is a professional haircut. But my team assured me that the cash prize was more valuable to these social entrepreneurs at this time. So we have 4 incredible judges that will be joining us in a minute. I'll be introducing them in a sec. And each pitch will be 7 minutes with 8 minutes Q&A. And as audience members, you can participate in the audience Q&A. All you need to do is to write your questions during the pitch or the Q&A into the YouTube comments, and someone will whisper those questions in my ear, and I can represent you and ask those questions during the Q&A. How it will work is we'll have 2 pitches, then we'll have the keynote provocation by Indy Johar, and then we'll have 2 more pitches, and then we'll go into the award ceremony and the closing statements. And the award ceremony and closing statements will be presented by the Skoll Foundation and the Skoll Centre, and we hope that all winners will be announced at 3:50 p.m. UK time. So it's time to introduce the judges. I also asked the judges to share what is exciting them right now, and potentially an interesting book, resource, or business that they're finding particularly useful at the moment. So what I'll do is introduce the first judge of 4, and it's a pleasure to introduce the first judge, who is Shrin Madipalli. So Shrin is an MBA alum. He's the class of 2013. In 2015, Shrin co-founded a startup called Accommable, a travel platform for people with accessibility needs, which was acquired by Airbnb in 2017. Accommable is also a previous winner of the Skoll Venture Award, so it's particularly great to have him on board with us. He's a former corporate lawyer who started to learn code during his MBA and was lead developer for Accommable for the first 12 months, which sounds quite a task. Shrin has also spent the last 2 years in San Francisco at Airbnb HQ, leading Airbnb's global push to make travel easier for people with accessibility needs. And he recently returned back to London. So Shrin, over to you. Please tell us what you're excited about right now.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I was quite amused at your offer of a haircut. If only I could actually take up that offer. A few years ago, I might have done so, but thanks for the offer. So I'm really, really glad and excited to be here today. As you rightly mentioned, Chris, the Skoll Venture Awards will always have a sort of a very special place in my heart. It was the first money that I was able to raise at Accommable, and to this day, we would not have been able to have the transformational impact to help people with disabilities travel more easily and get out and about more easily, were it not for the Skoll Venture Award taking a chance on us back in the early days. And I just sort of want to reiterate that taking a chance, because it is so hard to raise early stage angel type money if you are building a social enterprise. And the thing that excites, there's several things that excite me, is that the competition like the Skoll Venture Awards can really give people a chance where so few other opportunities exist. Secondly, again, as you alluded to, Chris, like there are no shortages of problems in the world, and COVID and a whole host of other things are making them more acute. And while, you know, all these things happening are heartbreaking and tragic, there are some really pressing social problems that need addressing. And I think in the current climate, I think there is a once in a century opportunity to hit the reset button. There are so many social problems that are entrenched in systemic inequalities and systemic problems, but there is a sea change happening. I think we're all seeing it, we're all feeling it. And I hope entrepreneurs watching this today see it as a call to action, that this is the time where some of the most impactful businesses and opportunities can be created. And some of the problems that we've had in the past around inequality or climate change, like now is the time to I think do things like never before. And in terms of finally what's making me excited, less about a book or a particular website. Since I came back to London in January, I have really immersed myself in my spare time in the entrepreneurial ecosystem around London and in Oxford. And being away from the UK for 2.5 years has been fascinating, in the sense that coming back, there's a huge amount of energy, a lot of people doing really exciting things. And in a way, like the resource I'm excited about is the pool of talent and driven individuals wanting to do some really important things.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Shrin, for that. And thanks for your kind words as well about the Skoll Venture Awards. It's great to have you as a judge this afternoon. Okay, next up, introducing our second judge, Amy Clark. So Amy Clark is co-founder and chief impact officer at Tribe Impact Capital. So Tribe Impact Capital is Europe's first and only dedicated impact wealth manager. She's an environmental scientist by training, just like me, and Amy headed up sustainability teams at both the Bank of America and Microsoft, as well as the private client team at Charities Aid Foundation. Amy sits on the board of Big Issue Invests, the Development Council of the Future Fit Benchmark, and is an advisor to the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network. Amy, over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and just thank you to you and the Skoll team as well for inviting me to be a judge. Probably sounds quite trite to say this, but I'm really excited to be here. So that's what's exciting me at the moment. I think what's really one of the things that has really resonated with me being a judge here and thinking about the 4 finalists that we have is, if we look at what's happened in the last 5 months, we look at the COVID crisis, and then we look at the businesses that we've had. Each and every single one of them is tackling an issue that has really raised its head quite profoundly during the last 6 months. So, you know, we have Jammy Life, in-home care. We know the issues that COVID has created in care homes. And we've got a great example here of innovation in care. We've then got Solare as well, and thinking about decentralized energy and how do create more energy security, but also how do we ensure that we are better able to manage energy demand as well. So you've got a great play there into obviously the ongoing and looming climate crisis that hasn't gone away. It's, you know, it's still very much there front and center. We've got Medboda, the issues around rural isolation and access to healthcare and access to medicine as well, which we've seen coming through quite strongly as a profound issue during the COVID crisis. And then WASI, mental health, and the issues that we've seen with mental health as well, and people being isolated, people being, you know, put in quarantine, etc., anxiety, stress. So we have 4 businesses here that in many ways are really reflecting kind of the world right now, what we're tackling right now. And I think the thing that really excites me is actually just a statistic that you just gave, which is 43% of the applicants that came through this year were women. And in case, obviously, it's escaped your notice, I am a female, and I have founded a business, and I know how difficult it is to attract inward funding, so especially as a woman. So, you know, seeing this real drive now by female entrepreneurs to come alongside their male counterparts, for me, is incredibly, incredibly exciting. The big ticket in terms of what's happening out in the marketplace that fills me up and gives me a huge reason for joy is the shift that's happening in finance. We've all seen the hashtag Build Back Better. I will challenge Shrin a little bit on the resetting finance and resetting the system. We can't control alt delete our way out of the situation. We actually have to rebuild it. Rather than reset it, we need new software and new hardware. That's happening. It's been happening for a while, and the level of discourse at the moment in global capital markets is phenomenal. It's the loudest I've ever seen it, and it's being backed up with some really, really strong action as well. So I do feel that we're at a tipping point, a real tipping point with regards to impact investing, which excites me. I do have a book. It's written by a friend of mine. There are loads of books that I could suggest people read, but a very good friend of mine has riffed off Nassim Taleb's Black Swans. So John Elkington's new book, Green Swans, is a phenomenal discourse on creating wicked businesses for wicked problems. And I was very lucky. John sent me the manuscript before it got published about a month ago now. I got the manuscript at the latter part of last year. And as is John's way, he's an incredible orator and a great storyteller. It's a phenomenal book. So if anybody hasn't read it, I would definitely suggest having a look at Green Swans. But I'm just permanently excited, Chris. You know me, always excited about everything.
Oh, great. And it's been a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure to have that excitement as part of this journey at Skoll Venture Awards. And, I couldn't agree more. Policy and investment setting, we need to create the right environment for these little things, these amazing things to flourish, and that's a key part of it. So Amy, thanks so much for being part of the judging panel. Okay, next we have the third judge, so introducing Chaz Bantra. So Chaz is the Pro Vice Chancellor for Innovation at the University of Oxford. He's Professor of Translational Medicine in the Nuffield Department of Clinical Medicine. He's the academic lead for the Dementia Drug Discovery Unit. Chaz is an advisor and expert for many academic biotech and pharma drug discovery programs. In 2012, he was voted one of the top innovators in industry. In 2014, he received the Rita and John Cornforth Award from the Royal Society of Chemistry. In 2017-18, he was voted Master of the Bench from the Medicine Maker Power List. And lastly, in 2018, he was awarded the OBE, the Order of the British Empire, in the Year's Honours List. Chaz, great to have you here. Over to you.
Can you hear me? Chris, thank you very much. And thank you also for Peter Droback for inviting me to be a judge on this. I have to say, I'm totally privileged. I'm working here in Oxford. I'm surrounded by awesome people. And just yesterday, Chris, as you know, I was involved in a webinar late yesterday afternoon. And I was asked the question, what does Oxford do to support me? Or what's special about Oxford? What's the sort of USP in Oxford? And my answer was three things. I said, firstly, Oxford is full of some amazing students, some brilliant academics, some phenomenal researchers, and we've got an incredible alumni network all over the world. And amongst this community are many leaders, great innovators, and great entrepreneurs. And that is such an exciting environment to be in. You get energized by these people. I get inspired by these youngsters. The thing, I think we're privileged. We do have access to lots of great infrastructure and lots of great resources. But I think the third thing that we've got in Oxford is a culture of focusing on really big problems and trying to come up with solutions to those problems. I think there's a recognition here that, whether you're talking about climate change or dementia or rare disease or pollution or energy or whatever, these problems are big. Even in Oxford, we can't do them on our own. We have to work with other universities. We have to work with governments. We have to work with regulators. We have to work with funders. We have to work with industry. We have to work with other countries. In Oxford, we've got that really outward-facing international perspective. And if I can just share a recent example of something that I think is so exciting. In the past 4 months, it's been amazing that this university has been on the media, at least in the UK, on a daily basis. Not mentioned by Oxford academics, but actually mentioned by usually politicians. That hopefully is going to be the savior of the world. And if I just share with you how that happened, a company founded by some academics in this university, Adrian Hill, Sarah Gilbert, our most senior academics, including the Vice Chancellor, Gavin Screeton, the head of the medical school, John Bell, the Regis professor. They worked together. They worked with a large pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca, government. They worked with the regulatory agency, and now they're working with this company in India to help make 2 billion samples of this vaccine. It just goes to show that so you asked me to say a few words about why I'm excited, Chris. I love being in Oxford. I love working with the people that I'm surrounded by. I think opportunities like this afternoon is precious to me, because when I listen to these youngsters, I'm thinking, God, I wish I was that smart when I was their age, etc. So all I can say is thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure.
Thanks so much, Chaz. Thank you so much. And I think that touches on a key area which we're working on at Skoll is, how do we mobilize and leverage our collaborative advantage? And that's why it's a real pleasure to be working in such a thriving and vibrant ecosystem. And I think we've got a long way to go to actually drive value and make impact from those collaborations. So thanks a lot, Chaz. Okay, next up we have Anna Louise Fielding. So Anna is a specialist in the economic systems change. She's a leadership coach and advocate for social and environmental justice. She's a senior advisor at the Economic Change Unit and the Finance Innovation Lab. She was CEO of the Finance Innovation Lab, which is a pioneering charity building a financial system that serves people and planet. As CEO of the lab and led its spin out from WWF UK, she launched the world's first incubator for purpose-driven financial innovation. Anna is trustee of the New Economics Foundation, an associate of St. Paul's Institute and the Institute of Social Banking, and a fellow of the RSA. She's also featured in the Women in Social Enterprise 100, Women in FinTech Power List, and the Brummel magazine's Inspirational Women in the City. Anna, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Chris. It's fantastic to be here. I'm well aware, as Shrin said, that this is a time of pain and distress for many people, but it's also a time of hope. And I guess the two things that excite me and make me hopeful are, first, the movement for racial justice that's growing in power, seeing statues coming down in the UK and the US that should have come down hundreds of years ago. And I'm excited about the movement to build back better as well, to build an economy, as Amy mentions, that's just, that's sustainable, that's resilient, that's democratic. And I guess I think we need to bring those two conversations together, actually. We need to bring the conversations about economic justice and the conversations about racial justice together. If you want any evidence as to why we need that, I would point you towards the Runnymede Trust's recent Colour of Money report that lays out in really painful detail how racial injustice plays out in our economy. I'm also really aware that there is also an overwhelming and exciting, but very overwhelming volume of proposals out there for how we do build that better. And so something that I'm excited about, which I'm working on with the Economic Change Unit, is a website called beyond-covid.org that is going to collate and bring together all of the proposals for the initiatives and policies we need to build a better economy. In terms of the role for social enterprise in this, I think it's huge. I think social enterprises have a central role in creating a future economy that works for everyone and works within planetary boundaries. And to do that, we also need founders from everywhere in society. And I'm well aware that there are many barriers to entrepreneurship, and I really think now's the time for Skoll and other organisations that try and facilitate innovation to really double down on trying to remove those barriers. But it's also time for everyone to step up. So I think if you are watching today's event and you're asking yourself, is it time for me to do something like this? Then, from my perspective, it is. It is time to build something that will create the economy we want in the future. And I really, really hope that today's event will inspire some people to do that.
Thanks so much for that. And I think this is a perfect segue, because now we're going to dive into the pitches and actually to look at people who have chosen to step up and hopefully to provide some inspiration as well. So just a reminder, we have 7 minutes, which we will be playing a pre-recorded pitch, and then we'll have a live 8-minute Q&A. So please do, throughout this process, post your questions to the next pitch in the YouTube comments, and I'll make sure that we get your voice heard. So the first pitch, I'd like to introduce to you Jamii Life. So Jamii Life are using tech to increase access to home care in Africa. They're based in South Africa, and Zinith Ibrahim was an MBA, and she matriculated in 2017. So let's see the 7-minute pitch.
Good afternoon. I wanted to start by asking you to think of a time when a loved one needed help, mother, grandmother, and you couldn't, either because you physically weren't there or because you didn't have the financial means. This is the story of so many Africans. We leave home in pursuit of our dreams often that our parents and our grandparents couldn't. And in doing so, we leave them behind. This is also my story. My name is Zinith Ibrahim, and I'm the founder of Jamii Life, a platform that connects vetted health workers with people that can't care for themselves and families that need help. Jamii Life is inspired by my grandmother. My grandmother was bedridden for 16 years. My family took care of her. I was away from home, so my job was to pay for medical aid, which covered hospital bills and doctors. We never thought that we could afford health workers or expertly trained care. And so, when you think about aging populations, we think about the developed world. We think about countries like Switzerland, but in reality, in a country like Ghana or South Africa, there are 4 times more elderly people that need assisted living than in the developed world. Across the continent, 66 million elderly people will need care by 2050. That number is estimated to be around 5 million people in South Africa by 2050. And today, at least 2 million South Africans need help. That need is met 33% by community health workers. We are grateful for their service, but it's limited in capability and in coverage, and in the fact that they get paid 160 approximately pounds per month, which limits their ability to provide for their own families. Then there's the 60% of the population, including families like my own, who use a combination of family members and informal community help. It's almost always untrained and unregulated. And then there's the 7% of the population, usually the wealthiest, that can afford private care. This is Alice and Cheryl. I met them on a walk in an affluent suburb in Cape Town, and I was struck by how caring they were towards the woman that they're taking care of. When I went to speak to them, I couldn't help but wish how much I had hoped that my grandmother would be able to access this kind of care. So we founded Jamii Life, and I wanted to take you through our model. So to do that, I need you to imagine that this was 4 years ago and my grandmother was still alive. I was in Johannesburg and my grandmother was in Cape Town. Jamii Life allows us to connect vetted caregivers like Cheryl to provide the help that my grandmother needs. That information, with my grandmother's consent, is shared back to the families so that they can track progress over time and share it with doctors if necessary. We're taking vetted care and technology to communities through an integrated platform that allows for standard protocols and quality standards that these communities otherwise won't have, on-demand training for health workers and families who often don't have resources themselves, and allows us to track progress, including emotional state over time. More broadly, we're starting with direct-to-patient, targeting £2 per hour. That price point is important because it allows patients, elderly patients themselves, to pay for the service of a Jamii carer every weekday with the state pension that they receive, giving them independence. And we pass 80% of the revenue over to caregivers, which allows them to earn double the amount that they would if they were a community health worker. We spent 4 months last year with community health worker organizations and realized that by streamlining their operations, they can save up to 25% more time, improving their ability to serve 25% more people. And that can be extended to traditional nursing agencies. And we hope that that will allow them to either decrease their price to patients or to pay their health workers more. Our vision is a platform to transform the care system across the continent and provide social infrastructure for the elderly by starting with direct-to-patient, but partnering with community health work organizations and nursing agencies. Our journey so far, we've been blessed with incredible supporters. So we started with funding from Harvard Center for African Studies to do research with more than 100 family members to understand their real pain points. We went door to door to speak to more than 30 care receivers to understand what it takes for a foreign person to go into your home and provide care. This is some of the direct caregivers who provide family members with care from the initial research. In last year, we were awarded £24,000 by Harvard Center for Social Innovation and Change, and we spent time with more than 200 community health workers, including doing a paper-based test so we can understand the innovation that they're driving to serve their patients better, such as using WhatsApp to track location and time spent with patients. We're ready to launch on the 1st of July. We have referral partners in place and an amazing team. So Cheryl, who I mentioned earlier, has joined us. We also have Monica, who interestingly worked in the hospital that my grandmother frequented so many of the times over the 16 years. We have 4 interns who are capturing the information that we then visually present back to families before we can build a fully functional app. And this is our amazing all-female team. So I'm the founder. I spent 14 years in the private sector. I led GE South Africa Technologies as the GM and CEO. I was the general manager for the affordable healthcare business across the continent. We have Roseanne and Magda, who each have 35 years of experience in healthcare. Roseanne across 4 countries, and Magda focused on primary care and geriatrics. And then Sheba and Maggie provide remote support from Boston, Cambridge. They were instrumental in the original user design and the product mapping. Again, we've been supported by some incredible organizations, and we're very grateful for that. We need an additional £40,000 for year 1 of operations. So that starts at the beginning of July and takes us through the end of June 2021. That'll allow us to ramp up to 10 caregivers, to build out a fully functional app and to cover year 1 of operational costs. That's in addition to the 24,000 that we already have, and cover things like medical diagnostic equipment, etc. We estimate that we need a total of £250, so 185 additional over the next 4 years to break even and to build partnerships to serve the 66 million elderly people across the continent. Mostly, we're so grateful to have been recognized as one of 4 finalists for the Skoll Award. We believe that this recognition will go a long way to helping us secure additional funding and break even in year 4.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So we have 8 minutes of Q&A. So after you, judges, take it away.
Zenith, hi, it's Amy. Thank you so much for that. It's wonderful to hear, and well done, incredibly well done in getting this far. The thing that I'm really interested in with Jammy Life is you've got these 2 sort of narratives embedded within the model. You've got the in-home care, which is incredibly important, as you've so beautifully articulated, but you've also got the lifting up of care workers on the economic ladder as well. As you grow and as you seek to position yourself more firmly on that path to serve the 66 million, do you feel that the financial model that you have in place will continue to allow you to only take 20% of the incoming revenue to manage the business? You know, can you see a clear pathway to being able to lock that so that, you know, the care workers will always be able to be lifted further up onto the economic ladder, as well as providing the service to the end beneficiaries?
Hi, Amy. Thanks a lot. So absolutely, you know, in fact, so to start with, we're supplementing that with the grant funding that we have already received. And that assumes that caregivers are seeing 4 patients a day. Once we get to 7 patients a day, the financial model works and we can pay them 80% of what we're receiving. And so anything that they do incremental to that would be incremental. And the vision would be that they have equity participation. To your point, and what we think is one of the things that's unique about our model is that we value the empowerment of health workers so much. And if they are empowered, if they are happy, then that would make them do a better job, and then patients would feel better, and that would generate repeat business. So yes, you know, once we get to 7 sessions per day, 7 hours sessions per day, based on the pricing that we have, it works. And you know, part of that, unfortunately, is that there's a low base in terms of what they're paid today. But we hope that the equity participation, and that's not new to South Africa, it's been trying to be promoted for a while. I think companies haven't been as progressive as they could be. So it allows us to scale and for them to be a participant to that, which is critical for us.
Thank you. Srin.
Hi, Zenith. Again, just wanted to echo Amy's thoughts. Thank you ever so much for the presentation and sharing your story. I know from personal experience needing sort of in-home care for more years than I can remember due to my disability, like why this area is so important, and also just how hard it is to get businesses off the ground in this area. So well done. My question is on a slightly more sort of systems level. So one of the biggest challenges to taking sort of good care businesses and scaling them to larger numbers of people to have impact has been some of the challenges around funding care for people around the world. How are you thinking about this in terms of ensuring that more people are going to be able to have the resources to actually purchase care in the first place, and this isn't just limited to those of high income who can afford care?
Yeah, so Shin, thanks. And that's exactly our model. So in South Africa currently, we have nearly 100,000 community health workers, and they correctly serve the bottom of the pyramid. What's different about us is, so we're not providing full-time care. And I think that's an important differentiator because that drives the structural cost up, which means that the price per unit needs to be high. And that's usually what the private carers currently do. What we're doing is we're providing care, very well-trained care in increments of an hour or more hours, but patients can select as little as an hour. There's no long-term contracts, and we're doing that on the basis, and I think a unique community insight for us. So in our communities, and when I say our communities, I mean colored and black in South Africa, at the risk of sounding too political, but we're open to speak about that, so I'm going to refer to it like that. There's always people in the house. We care collaboratively. It takes a village. It's never just the carer and the elderly person. The challenge is that you don't have the expertise in the house. And so what we're bringing is the expertise on the assumption that there's family members there that will supplement, that will be there for other things. And that allows us to keep the cost model low. And so we're charging 50 Rand per hour at the starting point. We'll price differentiate for people who can afford more and different services, etc. But that initial price point is important. And that'll make it accessible to almost anyone. Because like I said, that then means someone can pay for it from the state pension. Or it means that if you compare what the total cost is on a weekday, it's half of what minimum wage is in South Africa. So just all of those ways of triangulated means that people can afford it, even if they're earning at the lowest point. So it allows them to go out and work. And that's an important point for us because so often it's women that have to stay, that not have to, but that choose to stay behind to be the main caretaker.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. I have questions coming in from the audience, if that's okay. So thanks to all audience for posting your questions. The first one is from Dennis, and I just want to say, he says, hi Zenith, I just love your pitch, mission, vision and purpose. We've seen something similar done in the UK. And the question from them is, can you please expand further on what differentiates your company?
So I think we look, and some of this was referenced in our pitch, we look globally for inspiration. But I think it's important to recognize that our context is different. And so there's technology that's being used in the US and in the UK that we can't use here. It doesn't make sense because it's not accessible, even in terms of the smartphones that we use. And I'm not trying to say that we're less than, in fact, anything but that, but rather that it's different. And so I think one important point is the care collaboration that I just mentioned. So we care as a community. And so there's two parts to that. One is the caregiver will form part of a team, and that team is not our team, that team is the family. And I think the second thing is that we're building that into our service by design. So I think that's an important differentiator. We're focused on the healthcare worker, which I also mentioned. And I think that, is unusual, not because we're trying to do it to differentiate, but because I think it's important for our product. And the last thing I'd say is that it's as important for us to partner as it is to be different. So if there are organizations that we can learn from or tech that we can use, we would absolutely do that so we can deliver a better service. We don't have to be creating new.
Amazing. Thanks so much. I think that's all we've got time for from judges and audience questions. Zina, thanks so much for answering our questions. Really great to see you there. Okay, right. So we're going to move into the second pitch, if that's okay. Again, please do keep your questions coming in. It's fine to post the questions before the judge Q&A as well, so I'll get them a bit earlier. So our next pitch is solar energy. So solar energy is democratizing access to technology for solar installers in Africa. They're based in the UK, and joining us today is Max Boyt and Mike Rosenberg. Max is an MBA from 2007. So let's see their 7-minute pitch.
Over the past decade, solar technology has advanced so much that, in economies with weak power grids, it promises to solve the so-called energy trilemma, the by now existential need to achieve energy security, environmental sustainability, and positive social impact. The reality, however, looks very different. In Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy, grid power is down 50% of the time. To deal with this, Nigerian businesses and households rely on more than 20 million diesel generators, small and large, running every day, every night. As Nigeria is ramping up construction of new and upgraded hospitals and clinics in response to COVID-19, reliable power is more important than ever. Rooftop solar, combined with battery storage, has proven ideal for displacing diesel generators. But the business of installing solar is dominated by a handful of larger, oftentimes venture-backed solar developers. Meanwhile, capable, independent solar installers and electricians are struggling to scale their operations, despite widespread demand for solar from businesses and a growing middle class. Now, why is that? There are two key reasons. First, even though world market prices for solar panels and batteries have plummeted over the past years, in practice, the total cost of ownership in highly cost-sensitive markets remains too high. Second, smaller, independent solar installers are fundamentally lacking the technological tools the big guys use to design and sell solar. The first and biggest obstacle is determining what the real energy requirements of a potential site are. Without an industrial energy logger costing thousands of dollars, installers have to quite literally guess at dozens of variables. And then they have to determine which equipment is best suited for the job and what components are actually available in market. This typically takes weeks and too often results in an either over or undersized system and an unconvincing, mispriced proposal to the customer. Solaire provides the technological toolkit to rapidly design and successfully sell cost-optimized solar systems. Here you see the team of Sunhive, one of the most innovative solar developers in Lagos, Nigeria, with the MVP of the Solaire Cortex Remote Intelligence Hub. And here's our latest version, currently in pre-production, drawing on customer feedback and learnings from the field, with pre-orders from Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Zimbabwe. This is how it works. The Solaire Cortex connects to all key components in a rooftop solar and battery storage system. Crucially and uniquely, it connects to a building's distribution board, where it continually measures the total power consumption at 1-second resolution and automatically uploads this data to the Solaire cloud in near real time. This is because, through working closely with solar installers across Africa for years, we have identified evidence-based energy assessment as the key to transforming their business. This is what the customer journey looks like. First, the installer makes one single trip to a prospective rooftop solar site and hooks up the Solaire Cortex to the distribution board. Over the next 2 weeks, it remotely monitors and analyzes energy consumption patterns and local grid conditions. The Solaire Cloud then automatically generates a scientifically grounded system design and a PDF with a professional system and service proposal the installer then takes to the next meeting with the customer. If the deal closes, the installer sources the equipment from a partnering distributor and connects it to the Solaire Cortex unit already at site. Then, Solaire Cortex continues to monitor and manage the solar and storage system over the entire lifetime of the equipment. Now, once a remote monitoring and management solution is in place, a world of opportunities opens up. For the installer, the opportunity to offer power as a service and to provide remote, efficient, predictive maintenance. For commercial and development banks, the transparency needed to monitor their investments, boosting the bankability of solar. For the end user, the ability to remotely and smartly manage their power consumption. For infrastructure developers, a decentralized source of big data to develop smarter, more responsive power grids. And these possibilities are also why our solution has been selected as the energy assessment and monitoring solution for dozens of solar-powered clinics all over Nigeria. A central part of the COVID-19 response of the Nigerian government and donors is to equip clinics, isolation wards, and hospitals with solar backup power to ensure uptime of ventilators and vital medical equipment. Solaire Cortex is being deployed to determine how much power these hospitals need and to monitor their power supply in real time to ensure reliability. This is yet another reason why we are so deeply invested in Nigeria. So much so that we are establishing our business and embedded software development teams here, and will be assembling our hardware in market. And as Nigerian entrepreneurs will tell you, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, whether in West, East, South Africa, or South Asia for that matter. In all these markets, our technology has a potential to serve as a catalyst for the substitution of harmful fossil fuels at scale, contributing to solving the energy trilemma and addressing a number of sustainable development goals. Reductions in CO2 emissions, in respiratory vulnerabilities, and in disruptions to commercial activity, helping to bring about smarter grids, smarter cities, and by democratizing access to professional tools for solar installers, more high-quality businesses and careers. For now, our early adopters are established solar developers who are excited about the capabilities and the affordability of our hardware, and from whom we learn as much as vice versa. But as beneficial as this early traction is for us right now, our vision goes beyond this. We deeply believe in the transformative potential of technologically enabling independent solar installers and electricians. Not only those entrepreneurs we internally call the Gmail crowd, as they tend not to have corporate websites, but also empowering completely new entrants to the business of installing solar, such as Ghana's Power Sisters program we are partnering with. Recent Polytechnic graduates, trained as electricians, will be using Solaire Cortex to move up the value chain and become accomplished solar installers. With your help, we can immediately focus our attention on two areas with the highest impact. First, developing a real-time monitoring dashboard tailored to the acute needs of solar-powered COVID-19 clinics and their stakeholders. And the system design and sales software specifically aimed at independent installers yearning to scale their business and to truly start unlocking the full potential of rooftop solar. Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks so much, Max. Hopefully Max and Mike are joining us now. All right, so over to the judges for questions.
Want to go first, Anna?
Yes, please do.
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay. Max, that was the second time I heard that. First time I thought it was brilliant. Second time it was even better. So thank you for that. Max, in your dream scenario, where do you think you're going to be, let's say, a year from now and 3 years from now?
Thanks, Des. Let me pass this over to my co-founder, Mike, who's just as big a dreamer as I am.
Yeah, thanks very much. So
we have to dream.
We see this market on the cusp of explosion. You know, for too long, diesel generators have been the backbone of Nigeria's power, and decentralization is happening thanks to these plummeting costs. And as we work moving beyond these leading developers to the small independent installers, we see the potential for over 1,000 residential SME and clinic operations enabled even within the next 12 months. The hardware can scale, software is reaching a tipping point, and we have this early traction in this fascinating market. Beyond that, it's about expansion into other vital markets. Zimbabwe, Kenya, Ethiopia even. And so that's where we see this building.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, Max, Mike, that was fantastic. Thank you. Your level of ambition is inspiring. You've just talked about your ambition around moving along the adoption curve to independent installers and to electricians. I'm just wondering, how are you going to reach them? What are your routes there? How are you going to raise awareness? How are you going to increase adoption and reach that level of scale that you're talking about?
Yes, I would like to answer it's just word of mouth, but that, needless to say, isn't enough in a huge country like Nigeria. We're very fortunate in Nigeria, for example, to be working with the biggest distributor of solar and solar and storage, and through them we're able to actually reach everybody who aspires to be in solar. And our kit is also being sold just at the same spot where the solar panel is being sold, where the batteries are being sold, where the inverters are being sold. Beyond that point, and as you can see, we also inspire to really even go beyond that towards electricians, because these guys are often so brilliant to deal with really complicated wiring and three-phase buildings. So we know we have the confidence that these guys can do this. We just supplement their toolkit and actually introduce them to solar. And then there's obviously programs like the Power Sisters, which we're so incredibly fond of, where the wider development community can also come in and then actually get us up that curve. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, this is really about taking solar from a niche and working with the initial couple thousand installers that can reach these distributors that are in these trade bodies to the electricians. And this is about democratizing and demystifying solar. As Max said, these electricians, particularly Power Sisters, they know how to do the wiring. Putting the panel on the roof is easy. It's about enabling them to understand the components involved and to automate the system design. And so we can flatten that customer acquisition cost. We can empower them with our automated proposal generator, so we can give them a competitive advantage in sales. And then we can give them a differentiator in that they can do operations and maintenance, which is a vital source of ongoing revenue in a very competitive market. And so really, for solar to scale as an industry, it needs to scale through these fragmented electricians. And that's where Power Sisters is training us on how we could develop that distribution channel. But that is ultimately the vision.
Great, thank you.
Incredible. I have a couple of questions from the audience, if that's okay, judges, to ask those. So I'm going to fire two questions at you at once. So the first one is from Daniela, and her question is, how does the solution answer the solar energy problem of a lack of storage capability? And the second question is from Nasif. It sounds like they're based in Bangladesh, South Asia. Can you explain how you plan to straddle such far-flung geographies at the same time as a venture? So how do you deal with working across such a large geography?
I'll take the first question.
Yeah. Mike Schut, he once founded a venture called Africa Power Storage, so I think he's well placed to talk about storage, but don't go too deep, Mike, please. I'll take the second one.
So rooftop solar without batteries is easy. This is in 750,000 UK homes, 2 million Australian homes, over 1 million in Germany. You put the panels on the roof, whatever you don't use feeds back to the grid. The challenge has always been storage. Before it was lead acid batteries that failed within 1 to 2 years. Now it's these expensive lithium batteries. And this is really the basis of our technology. So we've integrated with lithium batteries from the very beginning. We can track their system health, their declining state of charge. But more importantly, we can empower customers with these solar and storage solutions to change their energy behavior. And this means that from a small, expensive battery, they can get more uptime. So the grid goes down, pop-up notification on the app tells you have so many hours and minutes left, and you can start turning things on and off. Now you take this into a clinic setting, it's not practical. So this is where we're pioneering smart plugs and what we call load control, so that we can automatically turn off non-essential devices and keep those ventilators going, keep that cold chain going in maternity clinic. So the benefit of storage Storage is essential in any off-grid or grid challenge market. Solar just won't cut it. But the challenge is always the cost. And so it's about how much you can eke out of that finite amount of power. Fortunately, the car industry has driven down the price of lithium and increased its reliability. But to really make it accessible in this market and to finance it, we need to add this intelligence. Now on to geographies, Max.
Yeah, it's a great point. I alluded to that earlier, and I think I can also kind of speak to that from my experience in East Africa as head of product of Mobisol, where we democratized really the decentralized energy as well. And there, the last mile problem, the so-called last mile problem, is obviously really key, right? The larger the geography is, the bigger an issue that becomes as well, right? So one aspect that definitely comes in on the technological side is GSM technology. So to be able to actually talk to the device wherever it is through mobile networks, that is a huge game changer and is very deeply baked into our product. Secondly, also it is about really empowering the entire value chain. So we work with everybody pretty much in the value chain. We add value to everybody in the value chain. And so apart from being able to roam in 180 countries, we're also able to empower the guys who actually get the kit into the field.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that. Okay, that's our 8 minutes up. Max, Mike, thanks so much for your wisdom and answering those questions. And it's great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, right. We are halfway through the pitches, and actually it's time to kind of take a little pause, change a direction a little bit, and introduce our provocation speaker. So it's a real pleasure to introduce Indy Johar. You know, I've been lucky enough to see him at conferences speak, and I'm so glad that he agreed to contribute to today. So Indy Johar is an architect, a co-founder of 00, and most recently Dark Matter. Indy, on behalf of 00, has co-founded multiple social ventures from Impact Hub in Westminster down to Impact Hub in Birmingham, along with working with large global multinationals and institutions to support their transition to a positive systems economy. Indy is non-executive director of WikiHouse Foundation, an RIBA trustee and advisor to the Mayor of London on good growth. Most recently, he has founded Dark Matter, a field laboratory focused on radically redesigning the bureaucratic and institutional infrastructure of our cities, regions, and towns for a more democratic, distributed great transition. He's taught, lectured at various institutions, including University of Bath, TU Berlin, University College London, Princeton, Harvard, MIT, and the New School. So, Indy, lovely to have you with us. To you.
Delighted to be here. Thank you so much. I suppose I'm kind of my purpose here is to perhaps be a little bit challenge and a provocation, and I think that's what I'm going to possibly do. In a sense, I'm going to just share some slides, and hopefully they'll come through. Is that visible? Is that okay? Chris, can you just confirm? Is that all right?
Yeah, I can see them.
Perfect, grand. So I suppose I want to start by this conversation by just recognizing where we are. So right now, the UK is in the middle of one of the world's, a recession which will be equivalent of about 300 years. We've not seen anything like this since about 1709. And I think we have to recognize that in a thesis, and I'm going to bear with me because I know we've been talking about some really great stuff, but I want to change some of the frames and I want to introduce a bit of challenge to that. I think what COVID has revealed is the fragility of our existing system. It has systematically made visible the scale of injustices that historic injustices, which have not been reconciled or in any way dealt with. It's reconfiguring actually the relationship between state, households, markets, and many of those things at the same table. It's making apparent a new type of global interdependence, to which I think is more than the market. It's also about global vulnerabilities. And I think more critically, it's heralding a new age of long emergencies, an age of risk, where the de facto truth was that we used to believe that we were operating in a consistent linear world to which there were some risks. I think we're now operating in a world of great uncertainty, to where certainty is the kind of is the black swan rather than the other way around, and driving in a suite of cascading risks itself. And if we talk about this, I think it's really critical to recognize the scale of what we're talking about. At a global level, it's unbelievable. It's going to reconfigure global, certainly the global economy in many ways. Also, mental health, psychic trauma. We're going to see a huge amount of structural effects all the way around the world at multiple levels, let alone the current actual devastation in human lives lost. This is a structural disruption. And this exists in a wider scale disruption. And this is where I start to bring this back home. Nutrition decline is massively visible. Entrenched inequality has been growing, certainly in the West, in the kind of developed economies. Species extinction has been significant. Labor market informalization, we've seen informal labor markets grow. The demographic dividend is increasingly becoming a liability. There's a great book called The Slowdown, looking at the change in actually demographics. Our infrastructure is more fragile, and environmental and climatic violence is growing, and diversity loss is massively increasing. So I suppose the first challenge I'd like to put to this amazing group, and you are all amazing, you are leading some of the change in the world, is have we made a dent? And I pause on that because I don't think we have time to operate in the same way that we've operated in the last 10, 15 years to make a dent. We no longer have that time. And I think that's where I start this conversation, because is our theory of change consistent to making the scale of transition that's required at the speed of transition that's required? And is that even viable? And everyone talks about systems change. Everyone talks about complex systems. But the reality is this is a complex system. This is obesity, the multiple drivers of obesity. And what you realize very quickly is that there is no one intervention that will make a change. This is done by the UK Cabinet Office, Peter Vallance, extraordinary work, Patrick Vallance. But one of the things about this is that this challenges our thesis of organizing, where there can be no center point, no single point of intervention, and no single strategy of change, but a movement, a coalition, a large-scale coalition of innovation that's required, which challenges our thesis of management innovation, which is largely single-point focused and focused on individual actors and building their heroic capabilities. Same is true with actually whether we look at the housing crisis that we face. We know the housing crisis is not a function of just building houses. It's a lock between land availability, sort of market pricing, banks and their vulnerability to house pricing shocks. So when we're dealing with these systems, are we really bringing the thesis of change? Are we building the instruments of change to drive the change that's necessary at the speed that's necessary? And we know when we're talking about systems, we've got a bunch of issues in terms of creation of runaway loops, externalities, which are massively growing, short-term optimization, and competitive decision-making. Have we really changed this in the thesis that we're operating in? And when you look at the suite, this is the work that we did with Imi Kaur and the Impact Hub Birmingham team, is extraordinary just to see what the scale of transformation, this is just a children's outcome, what's required to drive that. And if this does require beyond a magic bullet, we know there's no single point intervention, and we know there's a suite of interventions required. How do we operationalize them? And if we want to talk about a portfolio, real transition requires a portfolio of transition. This is work that looks at actually, it might require 50 to 20 different interventions in a city to drive meaningful transformation in the mental health of our city. And they go all the way from portfolio, from policy regulation to individual products and services. How do we organize change in this complexity? I think is a really critical problem, and do that at speed. And this requires new ways of organizing. New ways of organizing that aren't about individual objects or activities, but are around actually how do we build impact movements of actors working together for a shared outcome, because it's beyond the efficacy of a single organization. How do you build an open inquiry? How do you build a new accounting mechanism? How do you build system governance, system accountability? And how do you build system investment funds? Most funds actually, and by system investments, it's you invest in multiple interaction, multiple points, which actually together create a virtuous portfolio, a portfolio which is not about the distribution of risk, but about virtuous outcomes. We haven't built the technologies, and I mean technologies in the abbreviated sense, to build those system infrastructures of investment. Those are absolutely vital if we're going to deal with the complexity of the challenges that we're operating in. And this is true for government. If you want to change educational outcomes, we know the school is a very small, limited footprint of driving change. It requires multiplicity of change and multiplicity of locations operating in a movement, in a coordinated fashion, without being controlled. At the same time, we also recognize, and this is where I'll challenge even further, is that it is no longer just an issue of just the structures and the kind of organizing principle, but there are also deep code challenges in the nature of how we structured the world around us. So I would argue that the kind of scale of externalities, the scale of destruction of our common resources, scale of future liabilities, and the issues, whether it's 30 to 40 farming years left, farming cycles left in the UK soil, or whether it's like growth of antibacterial resistance, these are symptoms of structural failures. And the structural failures are actually deep code errors, and code errors at the level of how we understand the world. Code levels of we understand a tree as a resource as opposed to being a self-sovereign entity. Code errors in terms of actually we understand employment as the last bastion of a kind of a thesis of slavery, of a thesis of control. So if we want to start to think about the world in a fundamentally different way, we're going to have to challenge those underlying principles where actually of how we've organized the world, because those are the generator functions of some of the kind of challenges we face. And in a way, those require us to reinvent bureaucracy. So I think anyone who's going to make a real dent in the world is going to reimagine our bureaucratic frameworks. They're going to reimagine governance. We know our accounting system is non-functional for actually creating systems value. We know a tree is a liability on the balance sheet of a local authority because the environmental services and benefits are not accounted for, yet the liabilities and costs are. Our property rights are effectively no longer functional because they don't recognize that the social value or the linked value of property. We did some work on Highline, looking at how the Highline created huge amounts of spillover value. In fact, you could have paid for the Highline in under 10 months if you just took 10% of the land value uplift associated to it. Our property rights are still constructed on the inherent nature of the land rather than the associative social value of access that it provides. Our company structures are outdated, and B Corps are great beginnings, but they're nowhere near ready for the scale of transformation that we require. So one challenge would be, is this boring stuff this is going to be critical to making the scale and speed of change necessary? Second, I would say, and I'm coming to a close in terms of this process, but I think we're going to have to reinvent how we deal with challenge and look at prevention. But prevention is not just an idea of technology, it's an idea of public accounting. Our public accounting mechanisms don't take space, don't account for future liabilities and future risks. So how we deal with that is going to be critical. How we shift certain liabilities, future tasks, into different models. How we build a co-benefit economy, when we recognize a tree is not just a tree with a liability, but actually provides sustainable urban drainage mechanisms, provides all sorts of issues in terms of heat island effects, a whole sorts of a set of services, let alone CO2. But the reality is we undermine it because after 10 years, most street trees are cut down because actually that's when, after which time their maintenance costs and their insurance costs become too high. So unless we understand those multiple co-benefits, we will struggle to be able to deal with it. And then really delivering systems change, which is actually dealing with the underlying infrastructures and the portfolio of interventions required to deal with it, and our investment mechanisms to drive that. And how do we measure that? So if we go through this, I would like to put forward that there are 4 grand challenges that are critical if we as society are going to survive and move forward. 4 critical missions for our future. And it's the failure of our relationship with these things that has been the source of the reason why I think we are living in the scale of risk that we're living. 1, I would say it's our relationship with each other, the understanding of what it means to be human. Fundamentally, we still see we understand humans as individuals, whereas I think increasingly the science and the technology is showing us that humans are interdependent. actually we are multitudes of organisms. We're epigenetically linked to our context. Our brain is a social brain. It's linked to each other's. So how do we rebuild society for an age of human development and discovery in an age of automation? Is going to be critical. How do we rebuild our relationship with nature, which is not one of resource, but actually of cohabitation? And that's going to be about reimagining property rights, reimagining resource rights in much more structural senses. Do we need new treaties with land as opposed to property rights? Reimagining our thesis of ownership in an age of stewardship. It isn't about the sharing economy of corporates owning everything and actually sharing this out, but a more fundamental transformation of our thesis of ownership. And then finally, reimagining our relationship with the future. And that is not just about understanding the risks that we create for the future. And it's not just about understanding how the future brings risk to us, but also re-understanding what risks we're creating for future generations. And that unless we can do this, I don't think we can make a meaningful step forward. So I suppose my provocation to this room, and I think you're all extraordinary people, is that I think we need a structural change in the nature of response if we're going to deal with anywhere near the scale of the crisis we're approaching. And my question is, how do we do this? And how do we mobilize the social innovation, social change, impact financing, impact entrepreneurship community to start to operationalize in this way? I think is going to be vital if we're going to be relevant to the scale of the challenge that we face. With that, I thank you.
Wow. Thanks so much, Indy. It's hard to follow that. It's food for thought. I wish we had time to discuss it further. And I hope that question there is like, how do we do this? And I would invite everyone watching to walk alongside us and actually explore that further. I wish we had more time for a Q&A, but Indy, I can't thank you enough. And it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for your contribution today.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for all your help in getting us there.
No problem. All right. Well, I think we're going to continue on our quest and look at some incredible organisations working in this space. So next up, we have our third pitch, which is MedBuddha. So MedBuddha are providing verifiable and affordable pharmaceuticals directly to patients in Kenya. So their team is based in Kenya and the UK. We've got Diana, who's a current MBA and Skoll scholar, and we've got Nick, who's an MBA from last year. So let's have a look at their 7-minute pitch.
Hi, thanks for joining us. We're really excited to be able to share our vision for MedBuddha, which is tackling non-communicable diseases in Kenya. Now, we started with NCDs, issues like diabetes, cancer, etc., for 3 main reasons. The first is the substantial health burden. The second is that it's a growing problem. And the third is that it's largely preventable and treatable, and particularly through business models around provision of pharmaceuticals. So, thinking about pharmaceuticals, what are the key challenges in Kenya? The first is around affordability, with the average price of drugs at over 30 times the international median price. And second is around availability, with the average drug available only 43% of the time. So what's driving these key challenges? From a price perspective, there's a heavily intermediated supply chain, and every layer now adds additional costs to the end user. On availability, an inefficient supply chain and fragmented markets mean that the timing of supply doesn't meet the timing of demand, which leads to a lack of availability. So, thinking about the solution, if we could buy higher up the chain and retail directly to the end user, we can now cut out a lot of the costs associated with that intermediation. On availability, an efficient and aggregated supply driven by data, as well as the ability to deliver directly to the customer, would fix a large part of the availability challenge. And this is exactly what we're proposing to do. And so how does this work? Well, customers will place orders through a mobile app or platform. Our drivers will head to a centralized warehouse, pick up the supply, and then deliver directly to the customer. Customers pay using mobile money upon delivery, and a team of pharmacists follow up via call to make sure there are no outstanding issues. From a customer acquisition perspective, we're going to be using social media marketing, doctors' referrals, as well as patient networks and associations. Now, we've done a lot of research on the first 2, but haven't tested them. The third is a tried and tested way of us acquiring customers. We've also spent some time thinking about unit economics. And so starting from the retail price of the drug, less logistics, less customer care, and the drug itself, that still leaves us with a pretty healthy margin. Now, everyone that we've spoken to in this space has said the data we'd get from retailing directly to customers is hugely valuable, but no one can give us a figure for just how valuable. And so we're thinking about that, but we're not factoring it into any of our calculations. We've also done some analysis on the average cost to acquire a customer and the lifetime value of that customer. And that ratio is standing at $3.3, which gives us really healthy incentives to scale quickly. Now, zooming out a little bit and thinking of the market, we can see that there's a demonstrated market already, and it's very quickly growing. So in Kenya, there's currently $4 billion spent on healthcare, 800 of which is in pharmaceuticals, 130 million of which is in NCDs, and 90 million is coming from private payers already. Lots of tailwinds here, but three key ones are a growing economy, growing healthcare needs and infrastructure, as well as a general population dividend. So all in, that's yielded a 7% year-on-year growth in pharmaceuticals over the last 3 years. Thinking about impact and systems change, on impact, there's two buckets that are exciting to us. The first is a per transaction basis, where we see for each transaction, we can increase disposable income as well as accelerate recovery or improve health of our customers. Outside of that per transaction basis, our business model needs lots of manual inputs. And so there's a job creation thesis there as well. We've done some modeling to show what kinds of outcomes we're targeting. And so by the end of year 2, we're looking at $250,000 saved to our customers, as well as over $500,000 paid out in wages. That middle one is disability adjusted life years. And so what we're saying here is we're adding back into the system 1,400 healthy life years that would have otherwise been lost. From a systems change perspective, there's two things that really excite us. The first is that all insurers have said to us the biggest barrier to accelerating coverage of insurance is the cost of pharmaceuticals. And so if we can bring down that cost, we're now accelerating insurance coverage. The second is around the data and what that unlocks in terms of possibilities. And there's two things here that we're excited about. The first is risk pooling, where we can bring down the average price per user, and that enables us to reach the bottom of the pyramid and bring them up into our offering. The second is around preventative healthcare, where we leverage the fact that NCDs have extremely high comorbidity. So if we're treating a patient for diabetes, we can now begin to think about preventing things like hypertension, etc. When we think about financial projections, the first 12 months, lots of negative cash flows as we invest in setup and iterate the model. And once we get that right, you can see over the next 12 months, the path to scale is a sort of copy-paste model. In terms of key metrics, by the end of year 2, we've got customers at 50,000 and a very healthy EBITDA and gross margin position as well. In terms of the competitive landscape, of all the criteria on the left, we think affordability and availability are the key ones, particularly in a post-COVID world. Affordability because incomes will be crunched, and availability because COVID has caused lots of disruption. So given that our proposition does particularly well on those two dimensions, we think we are very favorably placed to compete with the incumbents already. In terms of our journey, we've just completed a pilot where we've supplied medication to a group of 50,000 diabetes patients, generated a healthy pipeline of orders, and demonstrated savings per prescription. We're now looking to raise capital to invest in some of the additional setup costs and begin to acquire a larger group of customers. That moves us nicely into the growth phase we talked about, where we expand the product portfolio, really hit a high end in terms of scale, and start to build out some of those deeper impact propositions in terms of our product. Finally, we're really thinking hard about tilting the system, building out those partnerships, and as we said, reaching the bottom of the pyramid and moving to a more preventative provision in terms of health. The team that we've built out has the functional expertise that we think is necessary to execute on that plan. So we've got expertise ranging from impact and investment, medicine, business development, as well as pharmaceutical operations. Our advisory team come from big pharma access programs, government, and logistics. So appreciate that was a lot of information. What's this all about in a nutshell? Well, in doing our research, we came across Mary, and Mary's sister was suffering from an NCD, and she couldn't afford the relevant medication. And so Mary kind of said, how can I lose my sister because of the cost of a drug? And quite frankly, we agree. And that's why we will enable people to easily access affordable NCD medication by leveraging technology and existing infrastructure to disrupt the current market. Because medication should not be a barrier to good health. Thank you.
Incredible. Thanks so much. And just a quick apologies for the bandwidth on that recording. It was from London, and believe it or not, they've got bandwidth issues. Hey, over to you, over to the judges for some questions.
Chaz, do you want to go first?
Stream, why don't you? All questions are always.
Okay, sure thing. First of all, thank you ever so much for the presentation. The question that I have is around, as you are disintermediating and going direct to consumer, what sort of processes do you have in place to check the validity of prescriptions and making sure that if you are if people are getting access to controlled medications, making sure that they rightfully have access to them?
Hi, yeah, thanks for that. Excited to be here. Diana, do you want to take that question?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. My internet was, yeah.
Oh, not a problem. As this is a direct-to-consumer model and you're taking out lots of different intermediaries, what processes will you have in place to make sure that people are only having access to the medicines that they have been prescribed to, and also checking those prescriptions on top?
Yes. So we're staffing our call centers with pharmacists in the first place. So they would be able to take the incoming prescriptions, right? And then second, we would actually have a callback process to the prescribing physician or health facility. So in that case, before we actually prescribe or dispense the medication, in this case, we'll have confirmed both the prescription and with the health facility, and the patients would actually sign against the delivery note as well.
Thank you.
Nick, Diana, that was fantastic. Thank you. Can I ask, what is the biggest risk? What are you most worried about?
I can jump in on that one. So I think the thing we're most worried about, particularly because our goal is sort of very much around the systems change angle, is the sorts of things that are outside of our control. So the one thing that our financial model and operational model, and in fact impact model, is very dependent on is hitting the sort of the volumes that we need in order to make this work at scale. And so the customer acquisition strategy and keeping the sort of the CLV to CAC ratio that I talked about in check, that's going to be a big challenge. And obviously this is at pilot stage, and so we're building these things out based on assumptions, and so I'm sure we're going to learn a lot and have to iterate a lot on how we get that right. But that's why the first 12 months you see sort of lots of negative cash flows, because we don't expect to get this right on the probably first 10 tries. It's more about staying diligent and finding a way to make it work. And so that's one large risk that we're already thinking about. And the second, particularly around systems change, is how we can influence some of our partners to achieve the goals that we're interested in. So, for example, this issue of working with insurers and some of their motivations and whether we can make this work. One of the things we're thinking about there in terms of de-risking is making sure that we own the final say on whatever data to insurers to be able to sort of scale up insurance. It's, can we be actively involved in that final piece of the transaction? So can we own the product? Can we own the service? And that then gives us more control and ensures that whatever we're offering to the world is aligned with our values and our vision. So that's sort of some of what we're thinking about there.
Thank you very much.
Incredible. And we have a couple of questions from the audience as well. So again, I'll fire two at you at once if that's all right. And so the first question is around the regulatory landscape. Are there any regulations that you have to be aware of? What is the regulatory risk around this space? And then the second question is actually looking at your kind of competitive advantage and what differentiates you compared to other online pharmacies in Kenya. So how do you kind of maintain your competitive advantage in the Kenyan context?
Okay, thank you for that, Chris. With regards to the regulation, I think maybe 1 year back, I will have said it will have been quite challenging to launch an online pharmacy because the landscape was that you couldn't actually deliver to a patient, right, without having a pharmacist in place. But I think recently what we have seen with increasingly more players in the market is that most of the regulators are open to online deliveries, and as long as you're able to showcase that you have the measures in place and you're able to showcase that in terms of controlled substances, this is actually delivered and dispensed by a licensed professional, right? With regards to the second question around competitive landscape, I think the fact that we're starting off focusing on chronic medication and we're super specialized on this is unlike most of the competitors who are open to sort of the general landscape of all prescription and non-prescription medications. So we want to be super focused from the get-go.
Fantastic, thanks so much. I think that's all we've got time for the questions. Diane and Nick, thanks so much. And yeah, thanks for the pitch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to transition to the fourth pitch, which is by Wazi. So Wazi are based in Kenya as well, and they provide affordable, secure and accessible therapists in Africa. We've got three members of the team joining us today for the Q&A. We've got Alex, we've got Shinting, and we've got David. Shinting, she graduated in 2014 from the Side Business School with a master's degree in financial economics. So let's see their 7-minute pitch.
Hi, my name is Alex Royer, and I run Wazi, a digital mental health company connecting people with therapy services over their phones across Kenya and East Africa. It's currently estimated that 1 in 4 people in Africa will have a mental health condition at some point in their lives, yet 75% of people do not get the help that they need. This leaves an estimated 230 to 270 million people who will be untreated across the continent. Additionally, mental health conditions account for a higher percentage of the burden of disease than HIV and AIDS. In response to this enormous problem, we're seeing increased global spending on mental health, both from development agencies and through employer wellness programs. Global development funding for mental health programs was at $308 million in 2016, which was the highest in the 5 years prior. Additionally, $300 million is the estimated size of the sub-Saharan African annual workplace wellness market. With all of this, there are a few main reasons why people are not receiving the care that they need. Stigma is possibly the largest blocker to seeking care. Stigma can come from self-stigma, publicly stated stigma, and the fear of being labeled. Even for those who are able to overcome the stigma, therapists are difficult to access. Therapy resources are low in the country and are generally concentrated in urban areas, making them hard to reach. Thirdly, cost of therapy is prohibitive to most. At an average of $25 to $40 for a session, and 35% of Kenyans living below the poverty line, most people can't access the therapy that they need. Lastly, for treatment that does exist, ensuring impact is difficult to do, especially when the team is distributed throughout the country. All of these reasons are why we started Wazi. Wazi connects mental health service providers with people looking for support and advice in a safe, convenient, and effective environment. Wazi therapy services are available through a chatbot, currently on both Facebook Messenger and Telegram, which is similar to WhatsApp and common in Kenya. This is also that they don't have to download anything new. Through the chatbot, clients create an account on Wazi and have the choice of choosing an anonymous username, ensuring privacy and addressing the issue of stigma. Once the client has a username, they will then see a list of therapists, select the best therapist for their needs, and book a time that is most convenient for them. Once it's time for the session, the client can talk to the therapist over voice call, video, or text. We currently deliver our services in 2 ways. First is through our employer wellness programs, where employers across Kenya pay for access to therapist sessions through Wazi's chatbot for their employees. Second is our Wazi technology licensing, through which government agencies and NGOs use our platform to support and manage their programs, increasing impact and reach. WASI has worked with 5 companies across Kenya to provide therapy services to their staff as an employee benefit. Through this model, employers pay for the use of WASI, allowing each employee to access up to 2 sessions per week with a therapist. Directly before and after the session, we ask employees to provide a self-reported well-being score, which helps us track progress and maintain quality. We then provide aggregated and anonymous data on employee usage back to the employer. Through the employer wellness business model, we receive a tiered license fee from the therapy organization and a % of the commission every time an employee has a session. Secondly, through our WASI technology approach, the Kenyan government is using our platform to power an initiative to provide free access to therapy for vulnerable populations. Some of the key population focuses are youth, LGBTQI, and maternal health. Therapists specialized in working with these populations hold sessions with beneficiaries, and WASI delivers globally recognized mental health assessments. We can then track how beneficiaries are progressing using a dashboard to measure program effectiveness. Over the span of 6 months, we expect to reach around 10,000 beneficiaries and plan to expand into a longer-term partnership. Through the technology licensing model, the NGO or organization pays a license fee based on the number of beneficiaries and number of therapists. Globally, the number of mental health companies is increasing as focus on the sector grows and people become more familiar with digital wellness. As a technology platform, we are uniquely positioned to partner with many global organizations as possible to consolidate efforts and increase our reach, including through partnerships with organizations who have historically not focused on the digital aspect of providing their services. We are committed to the privacy of our members and are constantly exploring ways to ensure security at the highest standard. Some initiatives we currently have are allowing users to be anonymous, SSL encrypted API endpoints, and the ability for users to delete personal data. Through 2020, we are focused on learning to scale across Kenya and East Africa. We are heavily investing in our technology and our learning and iterating based on our experience and feedback from partners and clients. This year, we aim to maintain a client retention rate of 40% and aim to expand this across 4 partners. In 2021 and beyond, we're planning an aggressive expansion across Africa and other developing markets. Our focus will be on marketing our solutions more broadly, with an aim of having 10 mental health partners along with maintaining quality and impact as we scale. With an infusion of capital, we are heavily invested in scaling our programs more efficiently and cost effectively as we increase access to an impact for beneficiaries. Focus 1 is being available on the most convenient platforms for our beneficiaries. With that in mind, on our roadmap are 1, a progressive web app, 2, integrating lower access tools such as USSD and SMS, and 3, investments in DevOps for cheaper infrastructure at scale. Focus 2 is to increase therapy capacity in our operating areas. Based on feedback from our partners, we will build out online training capacity about psychological support, and 2, a group therapy functionality. Through 2021, these features will help us create an impactful platform for an estimated 50,000 beneficiaries. Our team has extensive experience in building mission-driven companies across East Africa and internationally. Additionally, on our team, we have leading mental health practitioners in Kenya and talented business professionals and engineers. Thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Alex, for that presentation. So we're joined by Alex, Xinqing, and also David. Good to see you. Right, so time for the judges.
Shall I go first, Amy? Okay, great. So Alex, Xinqing, David, that was fantastic, really powerful. Thank you. You identified a number of barriers to affordable, effective provision of mental health services, and one of those was around ensuring impact. And you talked a little bit about data tracking and dashboards. I wonder if you could go into a little bit more detail there. So who defines what good outcomes look like? How do you measure those, and what do you do with that information?
Thank you for that question. It's honestly something that a lot of people globally are trying to figure out, and it's a constantly evolving conversation. One of the things that we're doing is we're aligning ourselves who are specialists in M&E. So there's an organization in Kenya, for example, called Busara Center for Economics. And what they do is they set up experiments and help understand the impact of the programs that are actually being implemented. So it's through partnerships like that and partnerships that we have with like the University of Nairobi, for example, that will help us to ensure that what we are doing is actually impactful. Within the product, we have a number of different tools that are collecting metrics, and these metrics vary based on the partnerships that we have. And so, yeah, our partnerships are mainly to help us understand our M&E and implement more strongly.
Great, thanks, Team Wazi. Really, really interesting. And again, as I said to everyone, but just well done on getting so far in the competition as well. It's a huge accolade. I suppose I'm interested in the access points to the platform. So you said that you're working with employers, which automatically means that potentially you're excluding a huge portion of society who may actually require this kind of service. How do you see that split between business to business kind of sales versus business to consumer sales working kind of now versus how it might work in the future, given we still, unfortunately, we still live in a world where businesses are still in many areas struggling to get their head around mental health and the severity of mental health issues as well, and how they impact on performance. So I'm really interested to see, especially in the market you're operating in as well, how you're thinking about business to business development versus business to consumer development.
Thank you. There are a number of things that we are doing, and we're actually seeing a larger increase in our business directly to customer than we ever have before. And so that's outside of the B2B strategy. We have this kind of running as well. There are a couple of things that we're doing. One is figuring out ways that we can lower the price point. And one way that we are looking into doing that, we're actually developing partnerships right now, are through community health workers and training them up on basic psychological support. And so identifying the needs of populations in different areas and helping upskill lay people to be able to meet those needs. There are organizations here in East Africa who are doing that. They don't have any digital aspect of what they're doing. And so what we would do is we would connect those practitioners directly with the beneficiaries that need it. And this would be a much lower price point than we currently have. Obviously, this would come in line with a lot of M&E work that I spoke to before to make sure that we are actually fulfilling the high quality that we currently have. And the second thing that we're doing is we have been in conversations with national insurers here in Kenya, and those conversations are early. There hasn't been any investment to date from Kenya in mental health, but there is a conversation about running a pilot to see if investing in mental health at a national level would actually be something that the government is interested in. And so we're keeping our ears and eyes open. Thirdly, expanding the partnerships that we have through government. And so working with University of Nairobi, working with the Kenyan government, and other partners who are able to front the cost of this for mass populations. And as you see through the presentation, the partnership that we have right now with the Kenyan government is planned to reach 10,000 people within 6 months, and within a year they're looking at around 50,000 people.
Thank you.
Great. We have two really great questions from the audience. So, and I'll give them both to you now. The first is, how does WASI address the issue of stigma amongst Kenyans with respect to seeking help for mental health issues? And the second one is, how would WASI market itself to rural people? How would you reach people outside of urban centres, those hardest to reach, who often need education and awareness more than urban areas?
Both of those questions actually have elements of the same thing. And in relation to stigma, that is obviously the biggest thing that we are fighting against globally, but specifically here in Kenya. Our service is anonymous, and so anyone that comes on, their name will never be revealed, and they can choose an anonymous username and then connect over our platform directly to therapists. So that is the way that we currently are helping people be anonymous and fighting stigma. We do acknowledge that this is a much broader problem than getting people just to be able to talk anonymously, and so we are constantly in conversation with advocacy groups here in Kenya and East Africa who are looking at ways to actually reduce stigma and just increase education. The largest radio station here, Capital FM, has a large campaign around mental health, and they're investing heavily in sharing stories of people like Wazi and talking to the mass population about what resources exist and kind of normalizing the experience for people. We are also on webinars constantly telling people about mental health. We have our therapists actually lead those sessions where people can write in and publicly and anonymously ask questions. So people see, again, that this is a normalized thing, and this is something that is shared across a number of people. That brings it to the second question of marketing in more rural populations. These populations are where the most education needs to happen and the most stigma reduction does need to happen. And so this is not something that one organization can solve alone. It solves this in collaboration with a number of different partnerships across the country, and wherever we can lend our expertise, we are there, and we are constantly increasing the ways that we're talking to people. And we also hope to tell people, once they are sensitized, that they have somewhere to talk. People can reach out to Wazi, and this is actually an outlet, because that is the second thing that we need to fulfill is once people are educated on mental health, and once that stigma has kind of loosened up a bit, there needs to be that outlet, and Wazi is there for that.
Incredible. Well, Team Wazi, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been a real pleasure working with you over the last few weeks. And that is the end of our final pitch of the day. So thanks a lot. The time comes now where we're going to move into the decision time. So the judges will decide, but also now that you've seen all the pitches, it's now time for the audience to also be heard. So what's going to happen next is you're going to see a slide with some details, and you're going to have 3 minutes to cast your vote on who you believe should win the Skoll Venture Awards Audience Choice Award. Hopefully the slide will come up in a minute, but just in case it doesn't, please go to slido.com, which is slido.com, and just type in the code SVA capitals 2020. So actually you can see the slide now. It's not hashtag SVA 2020, it's just SVA 2020. And what we'll do is we're just going to leave that slide there just for a minute. We will close the Audience Choice Awards in about 2.5 minutes. And this will be the last you see of me, except for celebrating the winners, because we're handing over to the director of the Skoll Centre, Peter Drobak, and also a representative from the Skoll Foundation as well. So we'll be silent just for 30 seconds or so, and then it'll be over to Peter to lead us through the final stages. Thanks a lot.
Americans will get this. Give you just one more minute to vote before we move on. Please do vote. It matters. It's important. This is real money. You can make a big difference for one of these ventures. So we'll leave that up for another minute or so. Please do go to the Slido now if you haven't voted yet. Again, we'll leave it open for just another minute or so, and then we're going to have to start tabulating. But as you're finishing up your voting, I just wanted to first say hello, Peter, one of Chris's colleagues from the Skoll Center. This has been such a fun event so far. I've been part of the Skoll Venture Awards now. This is the third year for me, and this year the number of applications and the pool of ventures and talent was really extraordinary. And obviously we saw some of the highlights of that today, but it's really just been overwhelming. So first off, congratulations to all the finalists pitching today. And this just underscores to me how much entrepreneurial spirit and energy is coming from the ecosystem out of Oxford, and that is also really expanded around the world, and how much we need to find ways to be able to invest more in this ecosystem. So something we'll be working on with Chaz and many others in the university in the future. Before we announce the winners, I wanted to introduce a really special guest and give him a chance to say a few words as well. And that's Jude O'Reilly from the Skoll Foundation. For those who don't know, the Skoll Center is a social innovation center based here in the business school in Oxford, and the Skoll Foundation, based out in Palo Alto, is an organization that creates long-term impact by investing in, connecting, and celebrating social entrepreneurs and other innovators who are driving large-scale change. And if you think about some of the aspects of Indy Johar's provocations around really treating the systems, not the symptoms, that really gets a lot of the Skoll Foundation's kind of theory of change and impact as well. We love working with them as our sort of second parent and deep partner, and really excited that Jude's going to be here to represent the foundation today. So let me tell you about Jude. He's the Vice President of Portfolio Investments at the Skoll Foundation. Remember, in Palo Alto, it is still extraordinarily early today, so he was up before 6 a.m. in a bow tie with a smile and an enormous cup of coffee to be with us today. So as VP for Portfolio and Investments, Jude helps to oversee a lot of the Skoll Foundation's funding, including, importantly, their portfolio of the Skoll Awards for Social Entrepreneurship, which are awards that are given out, several of them every year, $1 million awards to really transformational social change organizations, for-profits, not-for-profits. The types of organizations we hope that our Skoll Venture Award finalists today will evolve into over time. Jude has a terrific background after having been at this foundation for about 6 years. He previously spent 18 years in the private sector, working with big companies like Amazon, but also working as an entrepreneur in some health startups, some expertise that's really relevant today. And we've had some great conversations over the years about, how to increase the impact of the kinds of investments that we're each able to make in our respective organizations. I always really value his partnership. Please welcome Jude O'Reilly.
Peter, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your generous introduction. I actually never call myself an entrepreneur. It's such a privilege to be called by an entrepreneur, to be even entrepreneurial. So thank you for that. I have had the opportunity through our work at the Skoll Foundation and in my prior life to spend a lot of time with people with entrepreneurial ambition. So on behalf of Jeff Skoll and the Skoll Foundation, it's an extraordinary pleasure to join you today for the Skoll Venture Awards. As Peter said, I'm coming to you from California, where we, like you, are grappling with a global pandemic. And we, like many of you, are grappling with a crisis of justice, of colonialism, of white supremacy, centered here in the United States. We are living in a time of long unpaid debts now coming due, deep and fundamental flaws of what Indy Johar might call our deep code. When all is said and done, my hope is that we are judged to be as ready, as relevant, as durable in our work as the judges for this award have already deemed yours to be. Our congratulations to all the finalists for their exceptional work, their ideas, their vision, their temerity, and their ability to cajole and to coax others to join them in their cause. All the ingredients that turn sticky notes into business plans and business plans into impact in the world. As Camus said, and I'm paraphrasing, what's true of all the evils in the world is true of plague as well. It helps us to rise above ourselves. By the nature of your work, you've already proven to the world your ability to rise above. We honor that decision today, made long before any global crisis inspired the rest of us. Now the true test will soon be in front of all of us. How can we, how should we, how will we build back better, a healthier, a more just, a more sustainable world? For if you'll forgive me for quoting an American revolutionary, Thomas Paine, who said more than 200 years ago, we have it in our power to begin the world again. Back to you, Peter.
Thanks so much, Jude. That was terrific. We appreciate it, and stay with us. Jude is going to be kind enough to announce our winners in just a moment, our winners from the judges. And before we get into it, thank you to all of the judges once again for all the time that you put into this. And that involved several days of working with these organizations, hearing pitches, asking questions, and deliberating. We really appreciate the investment of your time. Without further ado, I could just talk and keep you all in suspense, but I think we're ready to go. So we have 2 awards to give out today. There's the Audience Award, which I'll announce first, and then there is the Main Skoll Venture Award, chosen by the judges, that will be announced by Jude in just a moment. This was not that I was involved in any of these decisions, but these were very difficult decisions. So I think everyone hopefully here is on screen. So I'm pleased to announce the winner of the Skoll Venture Audience Award, amounting to £6,000. And the winner is Jami Life. Congratulations. Chris says yay. Terrific job. Very proud of you. Thank you to all of you around the world watching who contributed your votes today. Made a real difference. Without further ado, let's just move on. And I'm going to turn it over to Jude, who will speak on behalf of the judges and announce this year's winner.
This year's Skoll Venture Award goes to both Jami Life and Wazi.
Woo!
Well done. It was a tie. So that award will be split. That's £22,000 going to each Wazi and Jami Life. Congratulations, along with the £6,000 Audience Award winner. So we're really proud of all of you. To Medboda and Solaire, awesome. Thank you. Before we move on to the closing, I'd love to give a chance for our winners to say a few words. And so maybe we'll first ask Zenith on behalf of Jami Life just to say a few words. Zenith, are you there? How you feeling?
Amazing. This is incredible. It's been an incredible journey. I want to just, my team isn't with me, but I know they're on the line, and they have been Maggie, Shiba, Razan. I'm incredibly grateful. And so that's the first thing. To the Skoll team, this means a lot to us. It will change the trajectory of our organization, and so I'm very grateful. And then, we have a ton of people supporting us online, and I'm just, it takes a village, and that feels like that's where we are today. So thank you.
Thank you, Zenith, and congratulations again. And now for Wazi, we have Alex, Singching, and David. Someone like to say a few words?
I have talked enough, so I will embarrass David and put him on the spot.
Yes, you have, Alex. I'm just kidding.
Well done, Alex. I'll say 4 words. And this is quoting, I think, one of the smartest people I know. That's nitwit, blubber, oddment, and tweak. I know I should say a lot more than that, but I think as Wazi, we're really excited, and like you can tell I'm having trouble expressing how excited we are, and we worked so hard, and it's always exciting to see people who actually see the value and the potential of what we can do in terms of mental health in Africa and around the world. So thank you so much for supporting us, and thank you so much for believing in our vision. Again, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you. And I remember how excited I was when I received the offer from Oxford several years ago. And this is the second gift from Oxford, and really a big thank you for you.
Thank you, and congratulations again to Wazi, congratulations to Jami Life, and to all the finalists. Remember, the award is one part of this, but the Skoll Center exists to help folks like you and ventures like you to succeed and create the kind of change in the world that you're trying to create. So I know I speak for the entire Skoll Center team and the Skoll Center community, as well as our judges here, that we stand by ready to help all of you, and not just the finalists, but the dozens of other amazing social startups that have been part of this process, many of whom I think are watching today. So thank you, and let's make sure this is not the end, but the beginning. So, it's time to wrap up. Thank you once again to everybody involved in making this happen. Thank you to the Skoll Foundation for your tremendous support. This award would not exist without you. Maybe in closing, I was thinking, as I was watching some of the pitches earlier today, I was doing a webinar with a university called COVID Conversations, and I was talking with my colleague Aoife Haney about the pandemic and about sort of climate change and what it means about sort of building more resilient systems, much along the lines of what we heard from Indy earlier. And we had folks dial in from all over the world, and someone asked a question: are you optimistic about the future? And my response was, I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm tired, I'm anguished, and I'm optimistic as well. And Jim Kim, one of my old mentors who founded Partners in Health and ran the World Bank for a while, likes to say that optimism is a moral choice. And so despite all that pain that a lot of us are feeling, I think that this is something that many of us share, that we choose to be optimistic, we choose to try to build a better future. And, watching your pitches today and all the passion that you're putting into your work, that really just reinforced that for me. So thank you for giving us a great dose of optimism and possibility today. Thank you to all of you for your participation. And finally, Chris, amazing work in building this all the way through. Nice job hosting today. We really appreciate everything that you've done. Cheers to the rest of our team. And I think we'll leave it there. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great weekend. Wash your hands, wear your masks, stay safe.